For decades, the farming towns surrounding Washington state's Hanford complex harbored a quiet, deadly pattern. In communities built on agriculture and dairy, local doctors began recording highly unusual spikes in aggressive thyroid cancers and strange, difficult-to-diagnose autoimmune conditions. Entire families were falling ill at rates that defied statistical probability. When residents pressed for answers, federal officials politely dismissed their concerns. The illnesses were classified as personal tragedies, statistical noise, or simply a string of terrible luck. But the victims living in the shadow of the reactors refused to accept that answer. Known collectively as the Downwinders, they organized, demanding an explanation for the sickness tearing through their neighborhoods. Their pursuit for the truth triggered a grueling multi-year legal battle. Armed with the Freedom of Information Act, investigative journalists and environmentalists hammered at the Department of Energy's walls of secrecy. In 1986, the vault broke. Under intense public pressure, the government was forced to hand over 19,000 pages of highly classified Cold War documents. Beneath thick bars of black marker, researchers decoded the records of a highly secretive military test, Operation Green Run. The files confirmed the Downwinders' worst fears. Their families had been poisoned by a calculated, state-sanctioned release of raw radiation. To understand why a government would willingly irradiate its own soil, the timeline has to rewind to 1949. 3 months earlier, the Soviet Union successfully detonated its first atomic bomb, codenamed Joe 1. The American nuclear monopoly was over, and the realization threw the Pentagon into a frenzy. The military suddenly faced a massive blind spot. They had no way of knowing how many reactors the Soviets possessed, or how much weapons-grade plutonium they were actively producing. The Air Force proposed a technological solution. They would fly spy planes equipped with specialized radiological filters near Soviet borders to sample the atmosphere and calculate their nuclear output from the air. However, this new equipment was entirely untested. Scientists lacked baseline data for what a freshly processed nuclear plume actually looked like as it drifted through the atmosphere. The resulting logic was cold and utilitarian. To track a Soviet radiation cloud, the United States military decided they had to create one of their own and chase it. Standard procedures at Hanford required nuclear fuel rods to sit in cooling pools for a minimum of 90 days. This waiting period allowed the most volatile, short-lived isotopes to safely decay before processing. But a decayed sample wouldn't give spy planes a strong enough signal to calibrate their instruments. The scientists made the decision to bypass the safety protocols. This diagram illustrates the timeline shift. Instead of waiting 3 months, they processed green fuel rods, uranium pulled directly from the reactor after just 16 days. At this stage, the material was raw, highly volatile, and packed with maximum toxicity. It was a strict cost-benefit analysis. The military's need for accurate intelligence data outweighed the established parameters of public safety. At 8 p.m. on December 2, 1949, engineers executed the command. They opened a valve on a towering concrete smokestack, venting the processed exhaust directly into the freezing night air. The invisible plume contained massive amounts of iodine-131 and xenon-133. The payload carried thousands of times more radioactive iodine than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The entire experiment relied on a specific weather forecast. Meteorologists predicted that strong upward drafts would carry the radiation high into the upper atmosphere, safely dispersing it over the unpopulated Cascade Mountains. The forecast was wrong. This diagram shows what actually happened. A sudden winter weather inversion trapped the heavy plume close to the ground, pushing the toxic gas straight down toward the valleys below. A slight miscalculation in wind patterns immediately transformed an upper atmosphere monitoring test into a low-altitude blanket of radiation covering local communities. Iodine-131 behaves predictably in cold weather. It falls. Over the next several hours, it drifted over the Columbia River and settled heavily onto thousands of square miles of active dairy pastures. As local herds grazed, the cows ingested the contaminated grass, concentrating the radiation deeply within their bodies. Within days, that concentrated iodine-131 passed straight into the local milk supply. For weeks, families purchased the milk, completely unaware of what they were pouring at local breakfast tables. Once ingested, radioactive iodine migrates straight to the human thyroid gland, where it ruthlessly binds to the tissue and bombards it with beta particles. While the Air Force successfully gathered their baseline data and calibrated their aerial filters, the citizens living downwind were simultaneously tagged with a mutagenic clock ticking inside their throats. When the Hanford documents were unsealed 37 years later, the public realized the terrifying scope of the event. They had been used as unwitting subjects in a massive radiological experiment. The Green Run documents exposed a reality far more chilling than any targeted act of malice. They revealed a system of pure bureaucratic indifference, a cost-benefit analysis where public health was mathematically traded for global intelligence. The eventual release of this information in 1986 was never a willing act of government transparency. The declassification only happened because the victims fought relentlessly, forcing the legal machinery of the state to open the vaults. Operation Green Run left a physical scar on the downwinders, but the most enduring fallout of the Cold War was the permanent contamination of public trust, destroyed by a secret detonated at home.
If you found this video helpful, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.